FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today's April 17th, 2017. So biggest news is what's going on in North Korea, although there's so many other things happening, but particularly North Korea looks like it's getting close to a flashpoint. And, well, what's the right move? Where do we go from here? Ivan Eland is with us now, Senior Fellow and Director, Center on Peace and Liberty, and the Independent Institute. Hey, Ivan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Kerry.
Hey, so we got a situation here in North Korea. I don't know what your thoughts are about Kim Jong Un, but what should we be doing here?
Well, he is an erratic dictator, and if there's ever a country or a person that you not want to have nuclear weapons, it's North Korea under his leadership. So I think, it is a problem. I'm not sure it's the acute problem that most people think it is. He's been ramping up the missile tests and that sort of thing. I still think he's probably at least 4 to 10 years away from being able to hit the U.S. With a nuclear warhead on a missile that can get to the U.S., the continental U.S. Now, of course, that doesn't mean he can't hit Japan and South Korea already. And even without his nuclear weapons, he has a lot of, the North Koreans have invested a lot of artillery tubes so that they can threaten Seoul, which is only 35 miles away from the border. And of course, there are millions of people that live there, which would theoretically constrain any U.S. response, because if we do something in an attempt to attack him, that's the first thing he'll do is start shelling Seoul. And so we have to be a little careful. The other problem, of course, is unlike Saddam Hussein, unlike Muammar Gaddafi, unlike Milosevic, these dictators that we've taken out in the past, he has nuclear weapons already, or at least it's likely that he does. He just doesn't have the missiles to get them to the United States at this point, although he has medium-range missiles, which, as I mentioned, can hit our bases in South Korea, Japan. So we do have to be a little bit more careful with him than other leaders that we've just nonchalantly taken out. And in fact, our previous policies have somewhat contributed to this problem. Obviously, he's erratic, and his father was erratic, and his grandfather was erratic, so that's nothing new. However, U.S. took out Saddam, and it took out Gaddafi, and Gaddafi was even had gotten rid of his nuclear weapons and his weapons of mass destruction programs, was playing ball with the U.S., and we still ousted him. Obama did that at the behest of the French, which was really a mistake because now we have chaos in Libya. But also the second mistake was it sends a message to countries like Iran and North Korea, who might someday want to get nuclear weapons or already are working on them, that that's the only way they can avoid getting invaded by the U.S. So, to a country like North Korea, you really don't want to feed the paranoia, which is also already there. So this is a very dicey type of situation, and there's no real good answer. Presidents have tried negotiating with North Korea, but they always say they're going to get rid of their nuclear weapons, and then they don't. And then, of course, we inadvertently, well, I shouldn't say inadvertently, but not on purpose, the United States government is, I guess, inadvertently is the only word I can think of at the moment. We've sort of reinforced his behavior because he likes attention and we give him attention. And probably the best thing to do with him is to treat him like a child who's misbehaving. Ignore him if you can. But we either slather him with more food aid, or we send carrier battle groups as we are now. But whichever one we do very visible things, and that gives him more attention. That's how he gets Western attention.
Yeah, so he doesn't like being neglected and ignored, so he'll go and do something just to bring that about, just to get the attention.
Right, exactly. And even if you think you're standing up to him, as we are now by sending this carrier battle group up there, all this is replayed in the past. So that's why I say I'm not sure it's that acute of a crisis. There's always danger there. I don't want to minimize that, but will there be a nuclear war between the two countries? Probably not, since he can't reach us with nuclear weapons. And I think there's enough caution on both sides. He's very blustery, but he's very limited in what he does. He occasionally shells some South Korean islands. He launches missile tests. He even does nuclear tests, which they say he's preparing another one. And he'll even provoke his ally, China, because China is really getting fed up with him. And I think Trump is appropriately working on China to bring him to heel, since China controls 90% of his trade goes across the Chinese border. China has investments there. North Korea sells coal, its major export, to China, which China has cut off, and that's unusual. China has two problems with putting too much pressure on him. One, they're afraid his regime will collapse and they'll get a bunch of refugees. And also, number two, if the regime collapses, they may have the same situation happened as with Berlin after the Cold War, where South Korea unifies with North Korea under U.S. military tutelage. And so, they don't want a U.S. alliance on their border. And remember, in the Korean War, when the U.S. troops got too close to the Yalu River, the border between North Korea and China went nuts and invaded, and of course pushed back the U.S. for a time in the Korean War. So that's a very key economic area for them, just north of the North Korean border, in China. And so they're very sensitive about having U.S. listening posts or U.S. troops stationed right across that border. So those are the two reasons that China has not put as much pressure on North Korea as the United States would like.
Yeah, well, it looks like China's attitude, though, has changed markedly. I mean, they've massed troops on the border, and like you said, they cut off the coal shipments, which is substantial amount of North Korea's exports to China, and they're ratcheting up the pressure this time.
Yeah, I think they are finally getting the picture that he's very dangerous. And, he's right on their border. So if he turns ugly, they're right there. And of course, the one thing that I think China is concerned about is China is a trading nation. And unlike the Soviet Union, it does have heavy economic ties with South Korea. It has heavy economic ties with Japan. And of course, these two countries are taking the brunt of North Korea's missile tests. They've been splashed, the missiles have been splashing near South Korea, near Japan, et cetera. And so I think China has a lot of these economic relationships to protect, and I think that's a good thing. So Trump may be able to work some sort of a deal. He's being very blatant that China will get a better trade deal if they help us with North Korea.
Yeah, and so like so many other issues in the world, the geopolitical scene, a lot of it is riding on China.
Yeah, and I think China, like I said, China has a much bigger incentive to play by the rules than the Soviet Union ever had, because it has all this web of economic, relationships, investment, trade around the world, and particularly in East Asia, where it wants to be a regional power. And I'm not so sure that the United States shouldn't allow China to be more of a regional power, and perhaps, retract our defense perimeter and let them do that like the British did the U.S. in the 1800s. We have a wide ocean separating us from China, as the British did from the Americans. And I think that makes you more secure. Distance still does matter, and moats, big moats, ocean moats do matter for security. So I think China can play a useful role if they choose to do so. And if Trump makes them a good deal, Trump is a transactional president, but maybe that's not such a bad deal, because I think the Chinese are very transactional too. They may feel that they can work with Trump.
Yeah. Well, his recent meeting with China's president, Xi, in Florida here, appears to have laid the groundwork for what's taking place now.
Yes, Trump sort of changed his tune a bit on the currency manipulation. Of course, China has sort of reversed that in the last couple of years. So Trump is not really giving anything up there by doing that, by not declaring them a currency manipulator. And he was also saying, I think, President Xi is willing to help us with North Korea. So I think there's a confluence of factors that are happening. Trump is moderating his position on China, but also I think China, as we were saying earlier, is getting a little fed up with North Korea.
Yeah. Well, do they really want unbridled nuclear power right on their border? I think
they think he's very erratic because, he's done this latest missile test. He just flaunts his, unpredictability as a pushback even against his ally China. And I think China is saying, hey, we've supported you this whole time. We're your only friend in the world. Everybody thinks you're cuckoo except us. So why are you doing this to us?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you would think, but is the guy Kim Jong Un, is he really nuts, erratic, or is this part of a strategy?
Well, I think you could say he's crazy like a fox. I mean, he's very well informed. He's the only person in North Korea that probably is. He watches all the news channels from the West. And I think this is the way he gets attention. This is the way he keeps his country together. Remember, his country, he's still got a communist system there, and it's a communist system based on hereditary succession, which you really haven't seen in many other communist countries. Maybe the Castros in Cuba are the only other one, but normally communist countries don't do that. But his people are starving. His economy is just bankrupt. It doesn't work. And so he's got to have something to hold the country together. And I think the quest for nuclear weapons and the quest to get saying, I'm a player on the world stage because, look, I can shoot off a missile and get the attention of the whole entire world, including China, the U.S., all the great powers.
Yeah. Well, I think perhaps at one point in his relationship with China, he was a useful pawn, but perhaps now he's outlived his usefulness. And if China wants to get rid of him, how hard is it for China to get rid of him?
Well, of course, they could invade the country, and they did it. It would be a lot better than if we did it. But then, of course, that would raise the U.S. military concern that China would just keep going. But if there was some arrangement between the United States, led by Trump, and China, led by Xi, that the Chinese would take care of the problem for us, that might be the best, I suppose. But, you're invading a country with nuclear weapons, and they probably know where all the facilities are. Many of them are buried. After the 1981 incident where Israel attacked the Osiris reactor in Iraq, after that, all these nuclear aspirants have been burying their nuclear facilities, like Iran buried a lot of their facilities, and North Korea has done the same. So, these weapons, they probably know where some of them are, but it's questionable whether they know where all of them are. And of course, our intelligence is probably better than the Chinese intelligence, because I'm sure Kim hasn't told them where they are. So if they did invade or something like that, they'd have to make sure they collected all the weapons.
Yeah. So do you think that Kim Jong Un got any kind of message from the U.S.'s recent actions in Syria with the missile attack, and in Afghanistan with the use of that Moab, mother of all bombs?
Well, I'm not so sure. I mean, the missile attack on Syria looked pretty lame. It reminded a lot of people of Bill Clinton's shooting off a few cruise missiles after Osama bin Laden had attacked the embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. So, I mean, it didn't even prevent the runway from being used almost right away. So I think, it may, Kim may take note of these things, but I think that, and they probably were meant as a signal to him, because this Moab bomb that they did in Afghanistan is a 22,000-pound bomb, which is designed to take out hardened tunnels and caves in mountains where they're hiding weapons and people on ISIS was. And so, he can't help but take notice of both of them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he puts himself in those categories. I mean, he's already got nuclear weapons, and he knows that's a big deterrent from the U.S. attacking him. It doesn't prevent it totally, but he's not in the category of Syria or the ISIS in Afghanistan.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's got a country, and
well, he's got nuclear weapons, and that's a big. I'm going to tell you right now, having spent 15 years, going out to the Pentagon and that sort of thing, that they do take notice when a country has nuclear weapons rather than if they don't. And the history of the U.S. interventions around the world show that we don't usually intervene when countries have nuclear weapons. Now, maybe he's so erratic that they'll have to do something, but it's very risky. And like I said, a military attack, you don't know if you've gotten all the weapons or not. You probably have to have somebody, either the United States and South Korea on the one hand coming from the south, or China coming from the north, would have to actually invade the country and grab the weapons before he could fire them off.
Yeah, and I just wonder, it's a militaristic state, kind of like no other in the world, North Korea. I just wonder, is the country so fed up that at the first sign of weakness by Kim Jong Un, they'll turn on him? And if there's an attack, will they greet their invaders as liberators?
Well, I mean, we've been predicting that this regime would fall for a long time, and it really hasn't. So it's stronger than I think people think it is. Now, would these people really fight to the death for this guy? I don't know. They could just say, okay, come on in, and, we're just laying down our arms. We're not going to die for this guy. And that's a possibility with any regime that's as nutty as this one is, and is oppressive to its people and not providing for them, or I should say letting the market provide for them. But because it's, he's got a totalitarian mentality, and he hasn't done any economic reforms at all. So, the people, you don't know if the people would be loyal to him or not, but certainly the main problem, I think, his military is big, but it's really old. I think it would be defeated, whether they fought or they didn't fight, they would probably be defeated pretty quickly. The question is, he does have short-range missiles that he could launch tactical nuclear weapons against the forces coming in to attack, to invade. And I'm sure those troops, he's put very loyal troops in charge of those weapons if he has the capability to do that. And he does have short-range missiles, and he does have most probably has the nuclear weapons. So that could be a problem. And he might even use them against China if he thinks his regime is in danger of going down. Then he has very little incentive to withhold those weapons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a bad situation no matter how you cut it. And as far as actions that can be taken, it's kind of an all or nothing proposition, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very dicey situation. And we can't forget that, I think if you tune in the media, the mainstream media on TV or whatever, this seems like an acute crisis, but we've had so many of these, if you follow it over time, which most people don't, they just see it when it comes on TV and then go on to some other thing. But if you follow these North Korean crises, there have been quite a few of them, and this seems abnormal. But I think we probably have, 4 to 10 years before he gets a missile that can hit the U.S. And even then, nuclear deterrence has worked for us mostly during the Cold War. In fact, it hasn't ever failed us during the Cold War. Even during the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Able Archer incident during the Reagan administration, it's still held, and that's because we have the best nuclear arsenal in the world. Even if he gets a few bombs and the missiles to get them to the United States, of course, we have thousands of warheads and lots of missiles, and many of them are invulnerable from submarines. So, of course, we can wipe his country off the map because it's a fairly small country very easily. The United States, number one, is a big country. Also, he only has a few weapons. Now, of course, we don't want to take a nuclear weapon on any city. That would be a catastrophe beyond belief.
Yeah.
But dictators think in terms of, well, wow, they can incinerate my whole country very easily because we have nuclear dominance compared to him. So our deterrence, I think, does provide us with something, even in the worst case where he gets, some weapons that he can hit the U.S. with.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to the question of, do you act now before he's got all those pieces in place and take your chances, or do you wait, hoping that somehow this regime is going to fall? And
well, previously, I think that both Republican and Democratic administrations, I think they felt that they could negotiate away the nuclear program as they did with Iran and get at least a suspension for 10 to 15 years. But I think most experts now think that that's not going to happen. He's never going to give up the weapons. And I thought that a long time ago, simply because he's paranoid. He thinks the United States is going to invade him or attack him. And so, as you point out, the real choice is between attacking now or waiting. But the problem with attacking now is that you don't really know whether you're getting all the missiles or all the nuclear weapons. And of course, then he'll become very belligerent if you don't do that. About the only thing you can really do is have a total invasion of the country by either the United States and South Korea or China, I think, to get all these missiles. You'd have to go, after you take over the country and occupy it, you have to hunt around like we did for weapons of mass destruction after Saddam Hussein. Now, Saddam Hussein had gotten rid of his and had never gone back to the programs. But I think you probably would find some in North Korea, both missiles, long-range missiles, medium-range missiles, short-range missiles, and also nuclear weapons. But of course, you have to invade the country without him, using the tactical nuclear weapons, the short-range nuclear weapons against you in some way. Even if he doesn't have the missiles, he can blow off the device in some way and on the troops coming in. So that's a problem. If you attack from the air, a lot of it's hardened, a lot of it's underground, and you can get some of it with the Moab and other bunker buster bombs, but you have to find it all, and that's the key problem, I think, the intelligence to find all the missiles and nuclear weapons. So if you're just doing an air attack, I'm not sure that's going to work. Interesting.
Well, limited options, but perhaps the time has come where some action is required, and how it will be contained. I guess these are all things we need to watch out for here because, while the situation is serious, it could get more serious very quickly. A mistake here, a mistake there, kind of like what we had during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, and I think if he does another nuclear test, that will ratchet it up even more than just a failed missile test, which happened, recently. And so I think also Trump's rhetoric is a bit. He better watch his rhetoric because he's going to get trapped. He's already said, well, if China doesn't do something about it, we're going to, meaning we're going to take military action. That's the implication, although Trump didn't say it. And therefore, when you let your rhetoric get out in front of you, you kind of paint yourself into a corner. I think in these situations, it's better to be like Teddy Roosevelt and say, speak softly and carry a big stick. The U.S. does have some big sticks it can use. What the question is whether it wants to do that or not.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling it's coming to a head. So I think we'll know more soon. It's just one of those situations. There's no good way of dealing with it.
Yes, it's very complicated. And hopefully, Trump has some good people. Secretary of Defense Mattis and this McMaster guy is an excellent national security advisor. So if he takes their advice, I think that they'll proceed with more caution than Trump's rhetoric indicates.
And talking about Trump and his erraticness, if you will, what about Trump? He does appear to listen to his experts, though, his staff around him, when push comes to shove.
Yeah, I think he does. The problem that he has is getting out front with his rhetoric and then, having to change positions, flip-flop on the issue or modify his position. And I guess if he doesn't really care, if he people sort of discount that into what he does. So maybe it won't have as big of an effect as any other politician, but because people just take it, with the, build it into the equation in the beginning. It's good to be tactically, sort of erratic, because it can fool your enemy. But when you're strategically erratic or erratic at the grand strategy level, that starts making your allies nervous, and your enemies don't know don't know where your red lines are, and therefore you can run into some problems. So we'll see if if Trump can harness his erratic nature into tactical situations, then, he might be okay. But I think hopefully in the end, he'll listen to his advisors as to what they think ought to be done.
Yeah, which so far he appears to be listening to him, for better or for worse. Well, I guess that's it for now. Ivan, hey, where's the best place to find your recent writings?
Well, you can find them on in major publications like CNN.com and The Hill newspaper. Also, my home website is www.independent.org. That's the Independent Institute in California. And I also blog occasionally on the Huffington Post.
All right. Hey, and as always, we'll have a link to your site and the show notes to this interview on Financial Survival Network. Got any questions or comments on this interview, any others we do? Send me an email at kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com. Our Twitter feed is @KerryLutz, and our Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Ivan, it's an interesting world out there, and we're just going to have to see how this thing plays out.
Yep, we are. It'll be very interesting to see what happens.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.